I knew Emma was betraying me the moment I saw her reflection in the restaurant window. She didn't notice me standing there. She was too busy laughing at something Marcus said, his hand resting on her back as they waited for a table. My wife of 9 years and my best friend since college, hidden in plain sight, thinking they were safe in a restaurant 20 miles from our hometown. I'd driven there to surprise Marcus with the signed contracts for our biggest client ever. Instead, I received the most crushing surprise of my life. As they were seated, Emma reached across the table and took his hand with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. That was 8 months ago. Today, they're about to discover that some betrayals come with a price they never imagined paying. Quick, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely. Now, if you've ever had someone close to you stab you in the back, smash that subscribe button because this story is about methodical revenge served ice cold. Hit that like button if you think people who betray trust deserve everything they get. Let's dive into this calculated takedown. My name is David Chin, and I'm a 34-year-old architect who spent the last decade building what I thought was an unshakable foundation, a successful design firm, a loving marriage, and a friendship that had lasted since our college days at State University. Emma and I met during our senior year when I was studying architecture, and she was finishing her degree in business administration. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had this infectious energy that drew people to her like a magnet. When she smiled at me across the library that first day, I knew my life was about to change completely. We complemented each other perfectly. I was the creative visionary who could see possibilities in empty spaces, while she understood the business side, contracts, client relations, project management. We spent countless nights in coffee shops, her reviewing my designs while I listened to her ideas about turning creativity into profit. After graduation, I proposed during our favorite study session at the same library where we'd met. She said yes before I'd even finished asking the question. We got married the following spring in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. Emma insisted on writing our own vows, and when she promised to be my partner in everything, to help me build not just buildings but a life together, I believed every word with my whole heart. The first few years were everything I dreamed of. I worked for a mid-sized firm downtown while Emma handled marketing for a local real estate company. We saved every penny, planning for the day when I could start my own practice. Emma would come home with stories about client meetings and market trends, while I'd show her sketches of the buildings I hoped to design someday. She'd trace the lines of my drawings with her finger, her eyes bright with shared ambition. You're going to change skylines. And I'm going to make sure the world knows your name. 3 years into our marriage, when I finally had enough saved to start Chin Architecture, Emma was my biggest champion. She took a pay cut to join me as the business manager, working 18-hour days to get our firm off the ground. We operated out of a converted garage behind our rental house, surviving on takeout food and pure determination. During those exhausting early days, she'd look around our cramped workspace with determination. This is just the beginning. We're building something that will last forever. That's when Marcus Williams entered our lives. Marcus had been my roommate and closest friend throughout college. He was studying structural engineering while I focused on design. We'd spent countless nights working on projects together, him calculating load-bearing requirements while I sketched the artistic vision. He was the brother I'd never had, the kind of friend who'd drop everything to help you move or listen to you complain about a difficult client. After graduation, Marcus had taken a job with a large engineering firm in Chicago, while Emma and I stayed local. We'd kept in touch through social media and occasional visits, but life had pulled us in different directions. When Chin Architecture started gaining traction, and I needed a structural engineer I could trust, Emma suggested reaching out to Marcus. Her enthusiasm was infectious as she made her case. He's brilliant, he knows your work style, and you two have that natural chemistry. It could be perfect. Marcus was ready for a change. The corporate world had worn him down, and the idea of joining a small, growing firm excited him. When he moved back to town and became our partner, it felt like the missing piece of our puzzle had finally clicked into place. The first 2 years with Marcus were incredible. Our firm grew from a garage operation to a downtown office with 12 employees. Marcus brought in his engineering expertise and connections. I handled the creative vision, and Emma managed everything else: client relations, marketing, financial planning, and staff management. We were featured in 3 architectural magazines. We won a prestigious design award for the Riverside Community Center. We were invited to bid on projects that would have been impossible for a small firm to access just a few years earlier. Looking back, I can see the warning signs that I was too busy and too trusting to notice at the time. Emma started working later and later, always with explanations about client meetings or marketing campaigns. She'd come home energized in a way that seemed different from her usual work satisfaction. There was something almost breathless about her excitement. She'd set down her purse with barely contained enthusiasm. Marcus had such great ideas about the Henderson project. We spent hours going over the client presentation. I think we're really going to impress them. I'd nod, focused on my own deadlines, grateful that my wife and best friend were working so well together. Marcus began suggesting changes to our business structure that would give him more decision-making power. He'd present these ideas during our weekly partner meetings, always with Emma's enthusiastic support. Marcus would lean back in his chair with that charming smile that had made him popular in college. "David, you're the creative genius. But Emma and I can handle more of the business side, so you can focus on what you do best." It seemed logical. I was happiest when I was designing, and they both had strong business instincts. Why not let them take on more responsibility? The shift happened gradually. Emma stopped asking about my day in detail. She'd give distracted responses when I showed her new designs. Our evening conversations became shorter, more focused on logistics and schedules than dreams and plans. Marcus started making decisions about client meetings and project timelines without consulting me. When I'd question him, he'd wave dismissively and say Emma had already approved the changes. When I'd ask Emma, she'd confirm that it was all handled. Emma would barely look up from her laptop when I brought up business concerns. "You don't need to worry about every little detail. Trust us to manage the business side." The physical distance between Emma and me grew too. We used to curl up together on the couch every evening, talking about our day and making plans for the weekend. Now she'd work on her laptop while I watched TV, claiming she had urgent emails to answer or proposals to review. Our usual date nights became less frequent, always canceled because of some client emergency or deadline. When we did go out, Emma seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently and claiming it was work-related. She'd type quickly while apologizing. "Sorry, honey. Marcus needs clarification on the Mitchell project timeline. This'll just take a second." I told myself it was the natural growing pains of a successful business. We were all working harder, taking on bigger projects, dealing with more stress. It was normal for relationships to feel the strain. But then I started noticing smaller things that didn't add up. Emma's wardrobe changed. She started wearing more expensive clothes, saying she needed to look professional for client meetings. She got her hair done more frequently, joined a gym, and seemed to put more effort into her appearance than she had in years. When I commented on a new dress or expensive shoes, she'd smooth down the fabric self-consciously. "I need to represent our company well. Image matters in this business." Marcus started showing up at our house more frequently, usually when I was working late at the office. Emma would mention casually that he'd stopped by to discuss a project or drop off documents. Her voice would take on an admiring tone. "He's so dedicated. Even on weekends, he's thinking about ways to improve our business." They developed inside jokes that I didn't understand. During meetings, they'd exchange looks that seemed to carry meaning I couldn't interpret. Sometimes they'd laugh about something and then explain it to me in a way that made me feel like an outsider in my own company. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd been working on the designs for our biggest project ever, a mixed-use development that would establish our firm as a major player in the city's architectural scene. I'd stayed late to finish the final drawings, excited to show Emma and Marcus what I'd created. When I arrived home, Emma's car wasn't in the driveway. This wasn't unusual. She often worked late, but something made me check the location sharing on our phones, a feature we'd set up years ago for convenience and safety. Her phone showed she was at the Riverside Hotel, about 15 miles from our office. I called her, thinking maybe she was at a client dinner. Emma answered, her voice sounding strained. "Hey, honey. What's up?" "Just wondering when you'll be home," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I finished the Henderson project drawings and wanted to show you." Her enthusiasm sounded forced. "Oh, that's great. I'm just finishing up a client meeting. It's running longer than expected. Don't wait up for me." "Which client?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why. There was a pause. Emma's voice became more careful. "The Patterson Group. They're considering a renovation project." I knew that was a lie. The Patterson Group was a small retail chain that had never expressed interest in architectural services. But instead of confronting her, I said, "Okay. See you when you get home." After hanging up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she'd made a mistake about the client name. Maybe she was at a different hotel for a legitimate meeting. But deep down, I knew. I drove to the Riverside Hotel. The restaurant was dimly lit and intimate, the kind of place couples go for romantic dinners. I stood near the entrance, scanning the room, hoping I wouldn't find what I was looking for. And then I saw them. Emma and Marcus were seated at a corner table, leaning toward each other in conversation. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about their positioning, but the intimacy was unmistakable. This wasn't a business meeting. This was a date. I watched from the shadows as Marcus reached across the table and took Emma's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled at him with an expression I recognized, the same look she used to give me when we were falling in love. When Marcus leaned over to whisper something in her ear, she laughed and touched his arm in a gesture so familiar it made my chest tight. These were the small intimacies of a relationship, the unconscious touches that spoke of comfort and affection. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, watching my wife and best friend build something together while destroying everything I'd believed about my life. When Marcus signaled for the check, I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. I simply drove home and sat in my office, staring at the Henderson Project drawings that had seemed so important just an hour earlier. That night, as Emma slipped into bed beside me, claiming exhaustion from her client meeting, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't react emotionally. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken and angry. Instead, I would be strategic. I would gather information, document everything, and plan my response with the same methodical precision I brought to architectural design. If they wanted to play games with my life, I would make sure I won. Over the next 2 weeks, I installed discrete monitoring software on our shared business computers. I hired a private investigator to document their activities. I began paying closer attention to our company's financial records, looking for any irregularities or unauthorized transactions. What I discovered was far worse than a simple affair. Emma and Marcus weren't just betraying me personally, they were systematically working to push me out of my own company. Marcus had been meeting with potential investors behind my back, presenting a business plan that positioned him as the lead architect and Emma as the managing partner. My role was described as transitional, a diplomatic way of saying I was being phased out. The most damaging evidence came from their email exchanges, which I accessed through our shared business server. They had been planning this takeover for months, carefully documenting what they called my creative limitations and resistance to growth opportunities. "David's too conservative," Marcus wrote in one message. "He's holding us back from the kind of projects that could really establish our reputation. Once we restructure, we can take on the challenges he's been avoiding." Emma's responses were even more hurtful. "I love him, but you're right about the business. He's not the visionary leader we need. He's better suited to working under someone else's direction." They had already consulted with a lawyer about the legal aspects of forcing me out. The plan was to use my supposed creative burnout and difficult personality as grounds for restructuring the partnership agreement. But the most crushing discovery was a series of messages about their personal relationship. "I never expected this to happen," Emma wrote. "When you moved back to town, I thought we'd just be working together. But being with you feels like waking up from a long sleep. I forgot what it was like to be with someone who really understands my ambitions." Marcus replied, "I've been in love with you since college, but you chose David. Now I finally have a chance to show you what we could build together, not just a business, but a life." Reading those messages, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated plan to steal my wife, my company, and my future. They had underestimated me completely. They saw me as the creative dreamer who couldn't handle the practical realities of business. They thought I'd be too devastated by the personal betrayal to fight back effectively. They were wrong. My counterattack began with a simple phone call to Robert Zhang, the most successful architectural firm owner in the city. Robert had been my mentor during my early career, and he'd always said I should call him if I ever needed advice. Robert's voice was warm when I explained I wanted to meet David. "Of course. Let's have coffee tomorrow morning." Over coffee, I laid out my situation carefully. I showed him copies of the Henderson Project designs, our company's financial records, and examples of my best work from the past 5 years. Robert studied the drawings with obvious admiration. "This is exceptional work. Your residential designs especially show real innovation. What exactly are you looking for?" "Partnership," I said simply. "I want to merge my firm with yours, but I need to do it quickly and quietly. I have reasons to believe my current partners are planning to force me out." Robert raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation. I showed him selected portions of the email evidence, enough to demonstrate the business betrayal without revealing the personal details. Robert's expression grew increasingly serious as he read. His voice turned cold with professional disgust. This is corporate sabotage. They're trying to steal your company. What do you need from me? A merger agreement that protects my interests and gives me a fresh start, I replied. In exchange, you get access to my client base, my designs, and my reputation. But it needs to happen before they can execute their plan. Robert leaned back in his chair, considering. You know, I've been looking for someone with your residential expertise to lead a new division. This could work very well for both of us. We spent the next week negotiating terms. Robert's firm would acquire Chin Architecture, with me becoming a senior partner and lead residential architect. The deal would be structured to pay out the partnership shares, but with specific clauses that would expose any financial improprieties or breach of fiduciary duty. Meanwhile, I continued playing the role of the oblivious husband and business partner. I attended meetings, reviewed projects, and made dinner plans with Emma, all while documenting their continued betrayal. The hardest part was watching Emma lie to my face every single day. She'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, tell me she loved me, and then spend the day planning my destruction with Marcus. One evening, she looked up from her laptop with feigned concern. You seem distracted lately. Is everything okay? Just thinking about the Henderson project, I replied, which was true in a way. It's a big opportunity. Emma nodded with false understanding. Marcus and I were discussing that today. We think you should take the lead on the creative vision while we handle the client relations and project management. Play to everyone's strengths. I nodded, fighting the urge to tell her exactly what I thought of her project management skills. The confrontation I'd been planning arrived sooner than expected. Marcus called a special partnership meeting for a Thursday morning, claiming we needed to discuss the future direction of the firm. I arrived at the office to find Emma and Marcus already there, along with two people I didn't recognize, a man in an expensive suit and a woman with a briefcase. Marcus stood as I entered, his demeanor professionally confident. David, thanks for coming. I'd like you to meet James Robertson, our attorney, and Lisa Martinez, a business consultant who's been helping us develop a growth strategy. I shook their hands, noting how Emma avoided eye contact. This is unexpected. I wasn't aware we were working with outside consultants. Marcus's smile was smooth and practiced. That's part of what we need to discuss. Emma and I have been concerned about the direction of the firm. We think we need to make some structural changes to maximize our potential. James Robertson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. We've prepared a restructuring proposal that would redefine the partnership roles and responsibilities. It's designed to position the firm for significant growth. I accepted the document but didn't open it immediately. This is quite a surprise. I thought we were partners in every sense of the word. For the first time, Emma spoke up, her voice carefully measured. We are partners, David. That's why we want to make sure the company succeeds. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Difficult decisions, I repeated slowly. Like the decision to meet with investors behind my back? Or the decision to develop restructuring plans without consulting me? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I pulled out my phone and opened the email app. Would you like me to read some of your correspondence with Barrett Investment Group? Or perhaps the messages discussing my creative limitations and need for transitional leadership? The room went silent. Emma's face had gone pale, and Marcus looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. Emma's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. You've been monitoring our emails? I've been monitoring our company's email server, I corrected. Which, as a partner, I have every right to do. What I found was fascinating reading. I stood up, still holding the phone. Would you like to hear the part where Marcus confesses he's been in love with you since college, Emma? Or should I skip to the part where you discuss how much better your life would be without me? James Robertson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. It seems there are personal issues that need to be resolved separately. Actually, I said, pulling out a second document from my briefcase, I think this is the perfect time to discuss the future of Chin Architecture. I placed the merger agreement on the table. As of this morning, Chin Architecture has been acquired by Zhang and Associates. All assets, client contracts, and intellectual property have been transferred. The partnership is dissolved. Marcus grabbed the document, scanning it frantically. You can't do this. We have to approve any major business decisions. Actually, I said calmly, according to our partnership agreement, any partner can initiate dissolution proceedings if they can demonstrate breach of fiduciary duty or misuse of company resources. I have extensive documentation of both. Emma stared at me as if she'd never seen me before. David, what are you saying? I'm saying that your plan to steal my company has failed spectacularly. Zhang and Associates conducted a complete audit of our finances and found several irregularities in how expenses were being handled. Particularly interesting were the charges for hotels, restaurants, and weekend trips that were billed as business expenses. I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Every dinner, every hotel stay, every romantic getaway you charged to the company while planning to betray me. It's all documented here. Marcus was frantically flipping through the merger documents. This is impossible. We had investors lined up. We had plans. You had plans to steal my work and my reputation, I said calmly. What you didn't have was the legal right to do it. Zhang and Associates was very interested in those investor meetings you held without my knowledge. They've decided to pursue legal action for attempted corporate theft. Emma stood up abruptly. I need to speak with David privately. No, I said firmly. We're done with private conversations. Everything you have to say, you can say in front of Marcus and your legal counsel. After all, you two are such good partners. The aftermath of that meeting was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Emma and Marcus found themselves without jobs, without legal recourse, and without any claim to the company they'd tried to steal. The merger with Zhang and Associates was structured to pay out their partnership shares, but after deducting the costs of their documented misuse of company funds, their final payments were less than $10,000 each. Emma tried to approach me at home that evening, but I'd already packed her belongings and left them on the porch. Her voice was desperate, tears streaming down her face. David, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can. No, I interrupted. We can't. What you did wasn't a mistake, Emma. It was a calculated betrayal that went on for months. You didn't just cheat on me, you tried to destroy everything I'd built. She looked at me with wild desperation. I never meant for it to happen this way. Marcus and we just connected, and I thought. You thought you could have everything, I said. My company, my reputation, my work, and him too. But you miscalculated. You forgot that I'm not just a dreamer, I'm also a businessman. I handed her the divorce papers I'd prepared. You have 48 hours to move out completely. The house is in my name, the cars are in my name, and, thanks to the prenuptial agreement you signed, you're not entitled to any of it. Her voice became a whisper. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. You made your choice. Marcus made his choice. Now live with the consequences. Marcus tried a different approach. He called me repeatedly, alternating between apologies and threats. When I finally answered, his voice was desperate. David, you've destroyed both of us. Emma lost her job, her home, everything. I can't find work anywhere in the city. Everyone knows what happened. Good, I said simply. I wanted everyone to know exactly what kind of people you are. His voice cracked with desperation. We can make this right. We can work something out. I'll leave town, I'll disappear. Just don't ruin Emma's life over this. I didn't ruin Emma's life, I replied. She ruined it herself. You both did. Every choice you made led to this moment. I just made sure there were consequences. The professional destruction was even more complete than the personal fallout. Word spread quickly through the architectural community about what had happened. Marcus couldn't find work at any reputable firm in the state. Emma's reputation in business circles was permanently damaged. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd moved to a small apartment across town, both working low-paying jobs while trying to rebuild their lives. Their grand romance had soured under the pressure of real-world consequences. 6 months later, I stood in my new office at Zhang and Associates, looking out at the city skyline. My residential design division had exceeded all expectations, bringing in 3 major clients in the first quarter alone. Robert Zhang knocked on my door, holding a newspaper. Have you seen this? He asked, setting it on my desk. It was a feature article about innovative residential architecture in the city. My renovation of the old Riverside warehouse was prominently featured, along with a photo of me standing in front of the building. Chin brings fresh vision to historic renovation, the headline read. Robert smiled with genuine pride. They got your name right this time. No mention of your former partners. I nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge. It's good to be recognized for my own work. Robert's enthusiasm was infectious. Speaking of which, the Morrison Group wants to meet with you about designing their new headquarters. It's a $50 million project. After Robert left, I sat back in my chair and thought about the journey that had brought me here. Emma and Marcus had tried to steal my company, but in the end, they'd given me something better, the motivation to build something entirely my own. I'd received a few messages from Emma over the months, apologizing and asking for another chance. I deleted them all without reading past the first few lines. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, and I'd learned that moving forward was more important than looking back. The divorce was finalized last month. Emma received nothing beyond her personal belongings, just as I'd promised. Marcus had apparently left town, unable to find work in our field. Their relationship had ended badly, according to mutual friends, destroyed by the same selfishness that had destroyed our marriage. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I reflected on what I'd learned. Emma and Marcus had taught me that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. But they'd also taught me that I was stronger and more resilient than I'd ever imagined. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't destroying them, though I'd certainly done that. The best revenge was building something better from the ashes of what they'd tried to steal. I'd won not just by exposing their betrayal, but by refusing to let it define me. While they were trapped in the consequences of their actions, I was free to create a new future based on integrity and honest work. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert about tomorrow's meeting with the Morrison Group. As I gathered my things and headed home to my new apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my choices and excitement about what came next. Emma and Marcus had started a game they couldn't win, but I'd finished it on my own terms, and that was the most satisfying victory of all. So we've reached the end of today's story. Did you see the business betrayal coming, or were you surprised by how deep the deception went? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think David's revenge was justified, or did he go too far? Drop your opinions in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. If this methodical takedown kept you hooked, smash that like button. And if you're new here, hit subscribe for more stories where calculated justice wins over betrayal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.